What's up, everyone? Welcome back to episode number 2 of the I Was Challenged series. In this series, we're getting a bunch of creators together and sending each other's recipes just to give them something different to do. So this is episode 2. I'll leave a link to episode 1 down in the description so you can check out that first fun episode that we did. This month, I was challenged once again by Kendra from Consuming the Goodness to do a almond flour garlic bread recipe. Something that I've never done before, so it's super exciting to try this out. So, without further ado, let's get started making this recipe. Okay, so this almond flour garlic bread recipe starts with 2 cups of almond flour. We've got 1 teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt. I like to use the Redmond real salt, and then 2 teaspoons of garlic powder. Now this is roughly 8 tablespoons of butter that will melt before we add to the mix. And we got 6 large eggs, and then as an optional ingredient, we've got 1 cup of shredded cheddar cheese there. That's an aged cheddar cheese that I have. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 176 degrees Celsius. Now I've got a glass pan here with parchment paper in it. It is a little bit smaller than what Kendra suggested. She said that a 15 by 10 is what she uses. This is a little bit smaller, but unfortunately that's the biggest one I have. So we'll start mixing up our dry ingredients here. So we're going to mix in the baking powder first. As saying in the intro, I'll leave a link to episode 1 of this challenge in the description. I suggest you check it out. It was a lot of fun. And there we've added in the salt to our dry mix. Give that a good stir in. And then we're going to add the garlic powder in there. Now you could add, I'm sure, more or less of the garlic depending on how much you like garlic, but this turned out to be just about what I like. And we're trying to follow the recipe that Kendra sent us, just the way she wrote it out, because that's what we're aiming for with these videos, just to see what our interpretation of the recipe turns out like. So that's all good and mixed in. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in the 6 eggs, which I've already beaten up, as you can see here. So we'll get that into the mix. And then we'll give that a whisk and get the eggs incorporated in with the almond flour. Now Kendra said you could do this in a mixer, but she uses a whisk to make her garlic bread. I don't really have a mixer that would do this, so a whisk is pretty much my only option, but I found that it worked just fine. So it doesn't take too long to get that mixed in. You just want to make sure you don't have any big clumps of almond flour in the mix, because that definitely wouldn't be good for your garlic bread. So that's looking pretty good. So we'll take our melted butter here. Again, that's about 8 tablespoons or 1 stick of butter. We'll get that mixed in there. Now again, Kendra's recipe did say that the adding the cheese to this garlic bread recipe is optional, but I'm always interested in adding cheese to recipes. Just makes the flavor that much better. And of course I have some 12-year-old aged cheddar cheese that I used for last week's recipe, so figured might as well add it into this week's recipe. So we'll get that in there and we'll give it one final mix, get everything incorporated. Overall, this recipe was really easy to do, not anything complicated about it. Like I say, I don't usually do recipes with this many ingredients. If you know my channel at all, a lot of my recipes are just chaffles, and typically there are 2 or 3 ingredients. However, I do like doing this challenge because it gets me out of my sort of comfort zone with recipes, and it's quite enjoyable. So we've got our glass pan here lined with parchment paper. Now again, this is a bit smaller than what Kendra suggested, so it may have been a bit thicker of a final product than what she gets in a bigger pan, but I was happy with the way it turned out. So we'll get everything in to the pan, and then we'll start spreading it out into an even layer on the bottom of the pan here. Now I suppose you could probably take this and put it in an even smaller pan if you wanted to make a thicker bread type thing. I think of, say, cornbread kind of thing where it's maybe an inch or 2 thick. I'm sure that would work well as with this recipe. What I will say is that Kendra said in her recipe that she cooks hers for 15 to 20 minutes or till the edges are golden brown. I did find that this took a bit longer. We'll get to that when we start baking, but I think it's probably because of the thickness. So we'll take our mixture and pop it in the oven that's preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And I checked on it every 5 minutes, and after 30 minutes, it was nice and golden brown on the edges, smelling really good in here. I really do enjoy garlic, and the cheese smelled really good in this as well. So we'll get that out of the oven, and to check to see if it's done, just insert a toothpick, and you just want to make sure it comes out clean, and that way you know it's done. So we'll let this cool for a couple of minutes and cut some squares out of it here. So it's nice and set, cooked pretty well. I thought I consider it cooked perfectly for the way I'd like it. So we'll cut a few squares out of here. It's not too dense. It wasn't dry at all. In fact, it was quite moist. So I was happy with the way it turned out. Really interesting recipe, and I'm sure there's a lot of different variations that you could do with this. Kendra mentions that you could use this as a pizza crust, so you could add pizza toppings onto it, put it under a broiler to melt everything. I'm sure that would be really good as well. So as you can see, turned out really nice and fluffy. Lots of good garlic and cheddar flavor to it. So yeah, definitely a win. Check out Kendra's video next, and we'll see you next month for episode 3.